Hello, welcome back to my channel. This is Bluefin Design and I'm Nikhil, and today we are going to design and prototype drop-downs, as I already mentioned in my previous video where we designed and prototyped different input fields like radio buttons, checkboxes, submit buttons or form buttons, input fields, and I also went through and gave you guys a nice surprise. I hope you liked it. Let me know down in the comments whether you liked it or not. And as promised last time, today we are going to design drop-down lists. So as you might have already noticed in the thumbnail, I actually went quite a bit ahead in this drop-down list when I was preparing for this video. So I really follow this design channel and the designer Howard Pinsky, who is the XD evangelist at Adobe itself. And I just saw his video about drop-down lists. The link I've included in the description, by the way, and you can check it out. And so I was just browsing through the comments on that video, and I noticed that a lot of people had some confusions about the drop-down design that we went through in that video. And so I tried to play around with the drop downs and to see what I can come up with. And well, you will be happy to see that we can do nested drop downs with all the hover effects, and you can add as many multi-level drop-down lists as you want. I'm fairly new to YouTube and I like sharing my skills and knowledge with the community. So if you like what you see, please like this video, share it with your network, and do consider subscribing, as I have a lot of videos planned for the near future. And so let's get started. Okay, so I'm in Adobe Xd now and I have this artboard created. So let's begin with the drop down menu. So just to show you how the entire drop down is going to look like, I'm creating these two rectangles. So we'll have the main item over here on the top, which the user can then click to expand the drop down list, and this main list will then show up, which has a bunch of list items. We have also have within that list items one more list item, which basically opens up this submenu. This submenu contains a few list items. So just doing this so we're all on the same page, I'm going to delete these all and start afresh. So with the rectangle tool, I'm going to create a rectangle. Alright, and I'm going to adjust the dimensions, the corner radius, and the colors. You can choose, you can adjust these settings as per your design style or as per your liking. I'm also going to duplicate this rectangle by pressing Command or Control D for duplicate. And for this one, I'm actually going to set the fill color to blue, or basically the accent color, which is blue in this case for our tutorial. So just remember, we are going to use this in just a few minutes. So for now, I am actually going to set the opacity for this one to 0. All right. So right now we are creating like one of the list items in the dropdown. All right. So for the list items, actually, we don't want the corner radius. So I'm going to set those back to 0, and I'm going to create one more rectangle. Actually, if I zoom in over here, I'm basically just going to create a copy. So again, I'm pressing Command and Control D to duplicate the rectangle, and then really just set the height of that rectangle all the way to just 1 pixel. The only thing we're changing is basically removing the fill and setting the accent color to blue. Okay, that's good. And we want to align this all the way to the bottom. So for this original rectangle, which is in the back, we don't want to use the border. So this is what the list item should look like. Obviously now we're going to add the text, which is New York and New York State. It is white in color, so we don't see that. Yes, I'm going to use this color for the text. I'm going to move this out and align that text to the center. Perfect. So this is what the list item looks like. Okay, so now with everything that we have over here, what I'm also going to do now is basically select all of these items and create a component, because we are going to reuse these items many times. So it's a good idea to create a component. So you can see in the properties inspector, you can basically just create a component like so. So we have the default state, which looks like this. Perfect. I'm going to come in over here and rename this component as list item. What we're going to do now is basically create the hover state. So when you hover over the list item, we want some interaction. So I'm going to come down to the properties inspector and select the hover state. It'll already have the interaction wired up by Adobe, so that's good. Now with the hover state selected, we're going to come in over here and remember the rectangle we created with that blue color. We're going to set the opacity back to 100%. With this text selected, I'm going to change that color to white. So this is what we want it to look like for the hover state. Perfect. So now this is the default state with that line over here, and this is the hover state. All right, so I'm going to actually move this out of the artboard so it's not interfering. All right, so now essentially what we can do is, this is the main component, or like the main instance of the component. You can actually identify it by this diamond shape on the top left. If that is filled with green color, that means that's the main component. So we don't want to use that or edit that or change that in any way. So I'm going to create a copy of that by pressing Alt or Options on the keyboard and just dragging it out. So it essentially creates a copy. So now in the case of a component, if you see over here, this diamond is actually white in color. So this is green and this is white. So that signifies that this is an instance of this component. So any changes you make to the main component will actually drill down to all of the instances that we've created of that component. So we're going to use this instance in our dropdown. So we're creating the submenu item right now. Okay, so we're basically just creating one more copy by pressing Alt and then just dragging it out. We have two copies right here. I'm going to select both, press Alt and then drag two more copies. Perfect. So now we have all the items or some items for the sub menu. You can add as many items you want for your design at this point. All right, so now we're actually going to create the main drop-down list. So essentially it's the same as this component over here. So again, I'm going to select all of these, press Alt, and then drag them out. It's that simple. But we want to basically arrange everything in the layers panel so we know what is what, and it's super important to name your layers. I cannot stress this enough. I'm going to create one more copy. Awesome. Okay, so this is what it will look like when this is finally done. Obviously, we'll have the main drop-down selector on the top as well. But before moving forward, we also want to make this one more copy, which is basically going to be the same thing, but this time, so this item, when the user hovers over this, like the submenu is going to pop out of that. So for this special item, I don't want it to be like a same instance of this component. So basically I'm going to ungroup this, just this one actually. So you can right click and then select this option, ungroup component. We're not changing anything, it's just unlinking from that main component. Alright, so we have all that text over here. I'm simply going to create a group for all those items by pressing Command or Control G, and we have a group. I'm just going to name it special item. So essentially, all these items together will form that submenu. Okay. Just for this submenu indicator, I also want to add an icon over here to the right side of this item to show that it is like a submenu, so the user knows to hover over it. So I'm going to make use of this plugin called Icons for Design. And so we have this chevron right icon, and it's just a personal preference, but for any icons that I use in my designs, I actually create like a bounding box rectangle, just so that I can basically just arrange or accommodate all sizes and shapes of icons within this one shape. This bounding box is basically void of any color or any fill or any border. It's just there for the dimensions. So I'm going to group these both items together and just name it icon. All right, now I'm going to bring this over here, align it to where I want, change the color, actually move this inside of that special item, so it's part of that group. Awesome. This is nice. So now with all of these items selected, we can create one more group, but you see, like for these submenu items, or even for these actually, like the drop down really does not have any boundary or like boundaries or bounding box. So we are going to use one more rectangle to basically just show that bounding box. Okay, so I have this rectangle which basically is the exact dimensions as all of these list items together. Now, since these list items do not have that corner radius, and my design decision, or like the application that I'm building, has a design style of having corner radii for all the elements. So how do I implement that for this drop down? Well, we can make use of masks. So even though the list item does not have a corner radius, we can actually have like a corner radius for this rectangle over here. So you see we have that corner radius, and now I'm going to give this like a bright red color. Don't worry, this is just a mask, so it's not going to be seen anywhere. Before creating a mask, however, I'm actually going to duplicate this rectangle by pressing Command and Control D. So you see in the layers panel, I'm going to rename the layers, especially these two rectangles actually. Awesome. So now I'm going to come down over here, select just the sub menu items. So it's basically this mask and these 4 items over here. Okay. So I'm going to select that, all of these items, and right click, mask with shape. So we have this mask over here. I'm going to rename this to submenu mask, just so we know which mask is that. And then moving on further, I'm going to basically unhide this rectangle, and what we're going to do with this rectangle is basically use this just so it provides like this nice border for our drop down. You can select any color for this, like for example blue in my case over here. I'm going to select the mask and this border and create a group. So now we have this submenu expanded group with all the submenu items, and then we have this special item, which is essentially like a drop down or submenu drop down. So I'm going to select both of these and as you guessed it, create a component. So this is that special item that we will use as like a second level menu item, or like for this drop down, like a nested drop down. So I'm going to rename this to special drop down. So this contains this selector over here and the submenu itself. Now over here for the default state, we don't want the submenu to be shown, obviously, so I'm going to select this and basically just hide it actually. Or we cannot hide it, we can actually reduce the opacity to 0. What we want to do now is basically create one more state of this component, which is going to be the hover state. So I'm going to create one more state, and this is going to be automatically wired up in Xd, so that's nice. Perfect. Let's test the progress. Actually, I'm going to set this back to the default state and now test the progress. Nice. And we can also see the hover states for those individual components, the list items that we created over here. So this is coming along, you guys. Save the progress. Before moving forward, we do want to actually highlight this item when it is hovered upon. So I'm going to basically highlight that by using that rectangle that I mentioned initially, but we're going to use it in the future. Set the text color to white. Set the icon color to white as well, but this time I'm going to rotate it by 180 degrees. Nice. So it looks like this. This is the default state. This is the hover state. Okay, I might want to add like a nice micro animation to this hover interaction. So what I'm going to do is actually what I want is this submenu item to actually slide out, or to appear to slide out. So in the main state or the default state, I'm going to select that entire group and actually just move it behind this special item. Okay, now the opacity is already to 0, so it's not going to be visible. What I also want to do is move all of the list items behind this main one as well, so they're going to appear out. So now since we edited the default state, when we go into the hover state, we actually have to put them back into their place. So I'm going to select that entire submenu, drag them out, and with all of those individual items, I'm going to set them back to their places. Also remember, if you're using these masks only for that border radius, you need to set those back to their positions as well. Perfect. So now this is what the initial default state looks like. This is the hover state. So in the default state, we actually have to come in over here, and this is the submenu expanded, which is basically all the other menu items. So you need to move them behind this special item. So this is on the top. All right, that's the only change we are going to make. Move them in the layers panel. So the layers panel is basically stacked in such a way that whatever is on the top actually shows up on the top over here as well. So maybe we, in the interaction that we were actually expecting or setting out to move all these items. We don't put them all behind that main item. We'll just keep it the same way it is. So that works perfectly fine. So the issue was that when this is basically behind the main item, the first item and its interaction was actually interfering with this hover interaction. So now we have fixed that. Awesome. Let's save the progress and move ahead. Okay, so now again, this was the initial default component that we made, or the main component that we made. So again, with this being the main component, we're not going to add this in the design. We're actually going to make a copy by pressing Alt or Option on the keyboard and then using that copy. So you see, this is an instance. So we don't want to make any changes in the main component. We want to use the instant of that component. So now with this special submenu created, we can move forward with creating the original drop-down menu. So this is what the drop-down menu will look like. Obviously, we need to create one more main item over here. So I'm basically just going to reuse what we have and create one more instant of that main component. However, this time I'm going to ungroup this and use all the individual items. So basically we don't want that line, so I'm just going to delete that. We do want this blue colored accent colored rectangle. However, obviously now I'm going to reuse that icon as well. So I'm going to come in over here, copy this icon and paste it on top, align it over here, select all those items and group them by pressing Command or Control G. I'm going to name this select. So just coming in over here, I'm going to set the rotation of this to point downwards. This rectangle being like the main one, I'm actually going to come in over here, give it a corner radius, and with this one I'm actually going to give it a border as well. The next step is to basically just group all of these menu items into their own group, drop down items. So we have two groups now. This is the selector and this is the drop down. The same way we did for this sub menu item, like we created this mask, we're going to actually create a mask again for this drop down as well. Again, now this mask is only for having this corner radius for all of these drop down items. If in your design you're not using corner radius, you don't have to use this. You can totally skip this part. So I'm going to give this a border radius of 8 to match it to this, and obviously have this bright color. It's not going to be seen because this is a mask. However, I'm going to create a duplicate of this and we're going to use that one. So that is going to be a border for the drop down. So I'm going to rename this to border, and this one with that bright red color to mask. I'm going to bring this inside this folder, select all items, right click, mask with shape. I'm going to bring this border inside as well. So it looks like this. If I zoom in, we see that nice border. So that's because of the mask. If you're not using the corner radius, you can skip that mask part. So we have this selector, we have the drop down items. Now we'll come down over here and create a component. So this is going to be like the main component, and this view that we see over here is essentially like the expanded view, but in the default state we don't want these items to be seen. So I'm going to rename this layer first. Within the default state, I am essentially just going to set the opacity for these items to 0. However, this time what we can do is we learned from a mistake the previous time. So we're not going to hide all of these behind the selector. Actually, we are just going to hide them behind each other, behind the first item. Perfect. Now this is only for creating that nice micro animation. If you don't want to use that, you can totally skip this part. So we'll come down over here and basically set the opacity back to 0. So this is what the default state looks like. Now let's move ahead with creating one more state, which is going to be like a new state, and I'll rename this to Dropdown Expanded. I'll come down over here within that dropdown and basically just undo what we did. Okay, I'm going to set the opacity back to 100 and we have the original view. Perfect, but in that drop-down expanded view, I want to basically change the view of this one as well. So I'm going to bring back in that blue rectangle that we had originally hidden. Set the text color to white. Also set the icon color to white. Perfect, but this time I'm going to actually flip the icon. Okay, we'll move that back to default state. Move to the prototype tool now, and we need to create the interactions. So when the user clicks on this item over here, we're going to create an interaction, and that is going to be a tap trigger, and auto animate is the type. The destination is drop down expanded, and easing is snap and 0.4 seconds. Perfect. I'm going back to the expanded view. Again, when the user clicks on this item selector again, we want the user to tap, obviously, auto animate. We want to go back to the default state. Perfect. So let's save the progress and test it out. You see that micro interaction. All the list items are actually flowing down from behind the first item. We have that hover state for all the list items, and well, I can assure you this is working, but it's just not showing up because I'm using masks over here. So actually I'm going to go back to the expanded state and show you why it was not showing up. So the mask we have is only these items over here within that shape are going to be shown. Anything which is outside, which in this case is the sub menu, is going to be hidden. Like, it is actually doing what it's supposed to do. We just have to set the mask correctly. Alright, so I'm going to ungroup that mask for now, create a copy of this this mask name, so Command and Control D. Alright, with that special drop down selected, I'm going to go back to the hover state. With the duplicate shape, actually I'm just going to move it out over here so it actually covers the sub menu as well. Now we're going to select both of these shapes, and we're actually going to use one of these Boolean operators. So we're going to create a union of both of these rectangles. So whatever is in these boundaries, not the entire rectangle actually, just the individual masks is going to be shown. Anything that is out of it is going to be hidden. Okay, now you can create masks out of unions as well. it is just the same exact way. There you go. I'm going to rename it to mask, and you see we have that union here as well. However, if you notice, select the main component. This is the expanded state. So I'm going to select that union, copy it, go back to the default state, paste them over here. Okay, now we need to basically create that mask again. So I'm going to right click, mask with shape. Perfect. Now for auto animate to work, we need the layer names to match in both the states. So I'm going to rename this to mask, and there we have it. But for the initial state, we don't need the mask to be over there actually. So I'm going to set the height back to 80. I'm going to set the height for this to 80 as well. So we have these duplicate copies, so I'm just going to remove the one in the bottom. So we have this over here. Perfect. Again, save the progress. Here's the moment of truth. So all of those hovers are working, and there you go. Just because we actually edited those masks, we see that nice sub menu actually popping out as well. Obviously now this is great progress. Hopefully you followed what we did, and you can see since we use those masks, we have those corner radii on all of the four corners for the main drop down and the sub menu drop down as well. Yay, we did it. So now the next steps, what you can do over here is actually, if you want more submenus, you can basically just use that component that we created, that special component, as many times as you want in this dropdown. Also, you can come down over here and edit the city names individually, because these are essentially the instances of those components. So this is highly scalable, nothing really like a workaround. This works perfectly and can be tuned and tweaked as per your designs. So you see we made use of so many components, and there you have it, a multi-level drop down done the right way. Also, this is a good place to mention that we do have an Instagram account where we share good practices in UX design and also UX research. So please feel free to follow us on Instagram as well. You can share your designs and what you come up with over here on YouTube or Instagram. We'd love to see what you design as well. Please like this video if you found this helpful, share it with your network, and do subscribe to our channel, as I have a lot of stuff planned for you. Alright, that's it for today. Thank you so much.